All right. You guys know that I really want to always hear about wins or, a victory of some sort, or barring a win or a victory, something in the bazaar, but it's got to be like real estate related. I don't want to hear about your personal bazaar stuff. Well, I do, just not on this call. So somebody share with me something that happened in the past week or two that is noteworthy. Shane, if nobody answers, I'm going to be picking on you. So
And I'm
I don't
thinking,
know.
somebody's got to have something.
I don't know if this is really noteworthy or genius or anything. I hosted an open house this weekend, and it was on a home that of course, they listed a lot higher than I recommended, but as always, they think their house is worth a lot more. So I knew it was going to be really hard. And when I have those really hard ones, I like to do a raffle because I'm trying to incentivize just people to show up so it's not a waste of my time. So I did a raffle, and I was actually really it was great because I got about four really good potential leads, and two of which might be a listing and also the buyer. So that would just for me, it's just seems to have always worked out if I have a hard one to do a raffle. So I can get
So
people to show
now,
up for that.
so I'm going to ask you a tangent question to that because uh, what are the questions you're getting? First of all, two questions. It doesn't need to be a detailed answer, Melissa. I don't mean to discourage people from participating, but I think this is good for the group, right? Open houses in light of the national settlement, are most of the people coming in without a realtor or with a realtor? And if they come in without a realtor, how are you handling them?
Okay, so I didn't have one that showed up with a realtor. Nobody showed up. Um,
I call
one
that
of
low hanging
them,
fruit.
what?
Low hanging fruit. That's what I call
Yes,
that.
yes, yes. And the one did have a realtor, but the realtor did not come with them. But so I talked with them, but just when they were asking me, they said, "Gosh, this price is really high." That was a really hard one for me. I didn't expect that question. I mean, I knew it, but the seller has a camera in their home, and so, and our fiduciary is to the seller. So I was just like, gosh, how do I handle this question? And so I just
So I have
said,
to
well,
apologize.
oh
I have
yes.
to apologize. My phone was attached and it rang right when you were saying what the question was. So tell me the question
Oh,
again.
yeah. So they said, okay, let's talk about price. It seems high, doesn't it? And
Uh,
I knowing that, I'm like, how do I
yeah,
answer this?
yeah.
So I just said, well, what do you feel the house should be listed at, or what do you feel is the fair market value? So that's how I came back with it. And they, of course, which I was grateful for, said, well, there's one just right down the street for 609, basically the same thing. And his is listed at 669. And
Yeah.
yeah.
By the way, I love it when somebody says it's basically the same house,
Oh,
you
right.
know, so I have found over the years that prospective buyers, take a lot of license with it's almost the same house. Like, oh, but the
Right.
basement's not finished and yours is, or oh,
Yeah.
yours actually has a yard, theirs doesn't. All these things factor in, and so I know you took it the right way. I always take it with a grain of salt. It's not the same house.
Yeah. So
Appliances are different. The condition of paint, carpeting, and everything, all those things factor in. So it
yeah,
just
well,
in your
yeah, they
mind,
showed
in
a
your
lot of interest in the home though, and they were really and so then I asked him, I said, okay, well, when you're looking at that home versus this home, like what makes you feel like this home is what you'd prefer? Because I could tell they really liked that home. And so then, so I try to take that step of asking the questions, right?
yep.
So
No, I loved your approach, and I love the fact that one of the first things that came to your mind was your fiduciary and your responsibility to your seller. Oh, and by the way, being aware that there's a camera
yeah.
recording things in the house because that could. So I'm actually really glad you brought that up because it's a timely reminder. Here's just we'll finish on this and then we'll move on to the actual agenda. What I have, and maybe you've experienced this as well. Sometimes it's the buyer, a lot of times it's the listing agent. When, let's say you have a 6 month listing, when you get to 5 months into the listing and it's not under contract, I have found that listing agents tend to forget their fiduciaries really fast, right? You'll get comments like, hey, listen, just give me an offer above X and I'll see if I can get it done. Do you think they have the permission from the seller to say that? Probably not, right? And so, and we can go through a list of 20 things like that. Even saying things like, well, listen, the seller's really desperate to get the home sold. You do not have permission to say that. That actually uh, degrades their bargaining position. And even though in our mind, well, there's two things going on. We justify it by saying, well, we're trying to help the seller get the home sold. But in reality, most of the time, I know this is true of Parker. I'm just seeing if he's paying attention. It's because we know we've got 30 days to get it under contract so we can get a commission. And so therefore we stop paying attention to our fiduciaries. Don't do that. I've had that with agents blow up a number of times over the years. So be really careful of that. So Melissa, thank you for bringing that up.
Hey,
Hey,
man,
All right. Hey, listen,
can I ask her just, well, just want to
let's go,
piggyback on that.
Daryl, and let's go Daryl and then Bill.
Okay.
sorry, I'm just going to speak up for Clint. He's responded on text because he doesn't have a camera or microphone. Said he took a listing, a duplex listing over the weekend, and says that working the SOI is always fruitful. He said, "Sorry, no camera or microphone." Anyway, in also, I need to publicly apologize because he was struggling with getting some comps on that, and he asked me to help him a few days ago, and over the weekend I didn't get it done. So sorry, Clint. I hope this is the same one, and I hope you got it figured out. One other thing, I got a call over the weekend from Kevin Strong, and this might tie into what Clint's results might be. He has a triplex bottom level commercial, two upper residential units that he was struggling with valuation on. He listed it, got multiple offers, and one came in $70,000 over asking price and closed in 5 days with cash. So certain properties still hot are getting multiple offers. So hang in there, Clint, get her done.
Hey, and one other thing, if you ever have a really peculiar appraisal thing, please don't. What I'm about to share with you is like insider information. Please don't exploit it. Otherwise, it'll be shut down for all of us. But we have a great resource in the company known as Ashley Wolfhewis, who's one of our top producing agents. She's also a phenomenal appraiser. If you ever have a unique situation that you need some advice, like a triplex, Daryl, or a duplex with some valuation, I know she's happy to take a quick call and at least point you in the right direction. So,
That's exactly
okay,
what
Bill.
Kevin did. He did get an appraisal.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Bill, go ahead.
I was just going to say, whether that buyer had an agent or not, your response would be the same. Because even if you're in a limited agency capacity, it's the same.
Good point.
I guess I just wanted to see if I was thinking outside, like wrong, if there was something else that maybe you got, yeah, if you had other comments, but I was thinking it would be the same regardless.
Which, by the way, just a quick reminder, not that we're going to spend a lot of time on this, but when we do become a limited agent, which of our fiduciaries are limited? There's two predominant.
Confidentiality.
There's one, loyalty.
Yeah.
You have loyalty to both parties. Therefore, your ability to have complete loyalty is limited. So is your confidentiality. So
And full
good
disclosure.
to full disclosure. We'll debate about that later, Deborah. But it's very much a lesser thing that the two predominants. I can see where you're saying that, but loyalty and confidentiality. So, all right. Hey, listen, just to kick this off with a little fun, I'm going to just share a screen. I was searching on something. And yep. Who is that guy? I mean, Can you see that? That woolly mammoth of a creature right there. Pretty awesome. I was looking at a previous video this morning to see what I had or had not covered, and I saw that and I'm like, oh, baby. Got the beard trimmed up and dropped a few LBs. Okay. So today,
Not so bad if you do say so yourself, huh, Mark? How Matt?
yeah, not too bad. Well, damn, who's counting? I'm only down 43 pounds in 9 months. I mean, nobody cares.
43 pounds, dude. That's amazing. Good job.
Well, the sad thing is, Bill, I went through my closet, one of the kids' rooms that's gone now. I use that as kind of my Harley closet in my riding gear. And literally, I think I was shedding tears because I have literally a pile of leather jacket, vest, shirts that just don't work anymore. So I told my wife to put them on Facebook and get them sold. So, all right, listen, today, what I wanted to cover with you guys is really kind of three things if we can get through them. One is assignment of the contract, and we touched on this in the past, but I wanted to go a little bit more in detail, and kind of a close cousin to it, which is, equitable and legal title, which is a thing when we're talking about assignment of contracts. And then if we can get to it really quickly, section 20.2, which is risk of loss, and then signing in counterparts. So if you have any specific questions about those, feel free to fire them off in the chat, and I'll have Daryl monitor the chat since I'm working on my laptop and don't have the advantage of multiple screens. So, all right, how many of you, just by raise of hands, how many of you have ever dealt with a signed contract, a REPSI that gets assigned? Parker, there's one. Really? Okay, Bunny, nice. Don. Okay, so we've got a few. So if you could, Bunny, I'm going to pick on you because you're my new friend.
Okay.
For those of you that don't know, Bunny is our managing broker for our St. George offices now. Super great to have her on board, and
Super
she's got a
excited.
ton of experience. I'm setting you up, Bunny, by the way. She's got a ton of experience. She represented Salisbury Homes for a long time.
A long time.
It was their broker, and so a lot of experience. So, Bunny, if you were to just give me, if we were having a ride in an Uber and had 5 minutes together, and I was telling you, oh yeah, I'm in the middle of a transaction. I'm actually buying a contract from another buyer who's under contract with a seller. Would you be excited, or would you be apprehensive on my behalf?
I would be apprehensive on your behalf.
Okay, if I were now to ask you the top 2 or 3 reasons why you would be apprehensive, what would you say?
That's a good question.
It is a
the
good
ones,
question.
the ones I have done were pretty simple because they were assigning them to they were simple. I never had any issues, but I can see there being a lot of potential liability.
Yeah, you have a gift for understatement. There is a lot of risk. Okay. Is it illegal?
That's a good question. I honestly don't know. I
It's
don't think
not.
it is.
It's not. Are there severe consequences? Yes. What are the 2 predominant things we're dealing with in we see this in the wholesale market, right? This is what wholesalers are all about. They go out and sorry, I'm gonna paint with a very broad brush, and I apologize in advance. But the wholesalers, the main tenets of wholesaling is what? I, as a wholesaler, I'm not licensed, so I'm not licensed, so I'm not bound by the rules of the Division of Real Estate or a code of ethics or any of those things. I'm a business person. and I go and find somebody. I'm going to use Susan. Susan's a nice gal. She doesn't know it yet, but she's widowed, and she just wants to sell her house and move to Palm Springs so she can golf to her heart's content. And she just wants it to happen fast. So these are some of the things that wholesalers look for: somebody who's got a high motivation, maybe not super savvy, haven't sold their home in a while, don't really understand the value of their home. So Parker is the wholesaler who says, "Hey, Susan, I love your house. I can help you get to Palm Springs really fast. And what I'm going to do, although I'm not going to say it too directly, is I'm going to offer to buy it from you within 2 weeks, and I'm going to buy it for $50,000 under value." He's not going to say that, but there's got to be margin for him, right? Because what Parker's going to do is he's got his own little investment community, a Facebook group or something. And once he gets it under contract with Susan, he's going to turn around to all of you and say, "Hey, I have a property that's $25,000 under value." Wait a minute. Wasn't it $50,000 under value? Where'd the $25,000 go?
In his pocket.
It goes in his pocket. That's known as a fee to the wholesaler, also known as not a transfer fee, but an assignment fee. An assignment fee. Now, again, nothing is illegal with that. Would I like to make my living that way? It doesn't gel with what my core is, because I feel like I'm exploiting somebody in the process and I'm pocketing it along the way. Hey, everybody's entitled to do what they want. Our job is to know what the game is. Okay. So what happens when Parker wants to, Savannah is super interested in the property. And she's like, "Yeah, a $25,000 discount. Are you kidding?" Absolutely. So Parker has a rep seat with Susan. How does this work? What are the nuts and the bolts? So that's what we're going to go through today. So does somebody have a copy of the rep seat up? If not, I'll pull it up really quickly. Open. So rep seat. Okay, here we go. All right, I'm going to share my screen here. All right, hopefully you can all see that. Yes?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to zoom in just a little bit because it's a little small on my screen. So we're not going to go through all the details. I'm going to go all the way down to what section? Come on, trivia test before I get there. Section 19. No assignment. Okay, so I mentioned this a year and a half ago when we talked about this. What do we see a lot in rep seats when somebody is up at the top and they say name of the buyer, and what do they put there when they want to assign? Parker would say
And or assignable.
Parker Smith and or assigns. Does that work? Does it work? Well, let's go to section 19 because this is super important.
As long as you take 19 out.
Yeah.
Yeah, as long as you take 19 out, which 99% of the time they don't, Bill. So section 19 says the following: the repsy and the rights and obligations of the buyer with a capital B, so whoever's declared up above, are personal to the buyer. The repsy may not be assigned by the buyer without a prior written consent of the seller. So here's the argument, right? Stop there at that period. And they say, well, it was agreed to by the seller because we put it up in the first section of the repsy and the seller signed the repsy. Does that work? No, it doesn't. If you continue reading it, I'll explain why. Provided, however, so here's the exception. Provided, however, the transfer of the buyer's interest in the repsy to any business entity in which the buyer holds a legal interest, including but not limited to family partnership, trust, limited liability, partnership, or corporation, collectively referred to as what? Oh, a permissible transfer. Okay, that shall not be treated as an assignment by the buyer that requires the seller's prior written consent. Okay, so we know I can transfer it to, Matt Barton's LLC or Matt and Nancy Trust or anything like that, and I don't need the seller's permission. Now, the last part is the part that for some reason people get fatigued and they never read this section, right? And what it says is, furthermore, furthermore, the inclusion of and or assigns or similar language on the line identifying the buyer on the first page of the REPSI shall constitute seller's written consent what? Only to a permissible transfer. Now, sometimes people read that really fast and all they see is, oh, if you include that, then it's the seller's written consent, and they forget the last 5 words. Only to a permissible transfer. So if they put that, the only thing that gives them contractual permission to do is to go and assign it to an LLC that they own, or a trust that they own, or a partnership that they own. If it's Parker transferring it to Savannah, this is not approval for that. There is no contractual approval. And if they did do that, they're in breach of contract, right? Cue up section 16, equal amount of earnest money as a minimum, okay? So super important for us to know the foundation of when we do an assignment. So all of us as fantastic agents, we all know what we should be doing, which is if we're going to do an assignment, we need to use the UAR's assignment of interest addendum. So let's pause there for a second. Why use UAR's form? Why not just write your own?
Because we're not attorneys.
Thank you.
And it exists.
And it exists, and you're not taking on exposure. And the biggest one is you're not an attorney. Yeah, that is a big deal. And so whoever said that, I'm grateful you said that. All right. So what does it actually say? How does this actually transpire? Listen, we've got, how much time do we have? 34 minutes. I could take an hour and 34 minutes and still be covering this. So I'm going to go really fast. My recommendation to you is look at this video, look at the things that I've highlighted as we go through it, and maybe highlight it yourself on your form, or send me an email and I'll send you this marked up copy. This isn't like a comprehensive. This is just as I go through mental reminders for me of what we should be paying attention to. It's a good bump start as to the things that are critical, but here's the thing. Let's start with section 1. What we've seen in the past is quite often if we see one of our agents or an outside agent say, blank addendum, Bob Jones, buyer number 1, is transferring control or rights to this contract to buyer number 2, Jane Doe. And it's not much more than that. It's pretty much that simple, and it's just woefully inadequate. And as we go through this, you'll see why it is so woefully inadequate, and the exposure not only your seller and or your buyer would take on, but you as a licensee and we as a company. So as just a blanket statement, anytime, and this really dovetails nicely with our company policies and procedures, which is, even though the Division of Real Estate says we as licensees can fill in blanks, that's generally not interpreted as take a blank addendum and write whatever the hell you want. That's not what we do. If there is a UAR form, which is written by attorneys, our company policy is to use a UAR or a DRE form where it exists. So here's why. So right out of the gate, it helps define, and notice anytime you see a term in a contract or an addendum that has a capital, it becomes a contractual term, right? It's not lowercase b, it's uppercase B. So these become terms known throughout this addendum: buyer number 1, buyer number 2. And it's very clear at the get-go who's who, and it's very clear up front that there's going to be an assignment fee, and it's going to be declared right here, right? Now, look at the second half of that paragraph. Savannah, if do you have this? Well, I'll read it. Just everybody be prepared. I'm tired of hearing myself, so I'm going to have some people read some sections. But the second half of paragraph 1, in addition to the assignment fee, buyer number 2 shall also reimburse buyer what? buyer number one for what? Any earnest money and any other deposits previously paid or delivered by the buyer under the terms of the Rep C. The prior deposits shall be due as provided in section 3. So listen, if you read that really fast, you could lose the important detail in addition to the assignment fee, because I've had people use this Rep C, and let's say there's $20,000 assignment fee and there's a $5,000 earnest money. And I had people think, well, the $5,000 is covered by the $20,000 assignment fee. It's not. It's very clear in this language that it's in addition to. So if the buyer number one had put up $5,000 earnest money and buyer number two is paying a $20,000 fee, they need to come up with $25,000. Okay. Now, is that covered in our blank addendum where it says rights transferred from buyer one to number two? No, there's no detail whatsoever. And anytime you lack detail, you invite the opportunity for somebody to debate and argue, and worst case scenario, get into litigation. All right. The second big section is this one, the acknowledgement approval of buyer disclosures. So again, think like as if you're buyer number two. If you come in and you sign this document without modification, you're already agreeing what? A, the buyer does not own the property, so that's disclosed to you. B, the buyer's entered into a Rep C with the seller. C, buyer number two, by this addendum, agrees to accept an assignment of buyer number one's interest in the Rep C and to assume what? All the buyer's obligations. And look at D, this is an important one. Buyer number two has previously received, so you're declaring you already got it as buyer number two, and reviewed and approved the Rep C and what else? All seller's disclosures referenced in the Rep C. So if buyer number one did a short due diligence deadline, say 10 days, and on day 12, you got the assignment, do you as buyer number two have the opportunity to do due diligence, your own due diligence? It's gone. You're agreeing right here. You're bound by the terms of the contract, and you're bound by the fact that you're agreeing that you've already received the seller's disclosures and you've approved them, right? It's not just you received them. You received, reviewed, and approved. That's a big, big deal. Okay. Then we go down to 2.2, approval of the property and waiver of conditions of purchase. So buyer number two hereby acknowledges and agrees as following. What? A, buyer is satisfied with the condition of the property, which kind of dovetails with what we just covered, and agrees to accept the property as provided under the terms of the Rep C. And then the last section B is super important. All conditions of purchase, including but not limited to buyer's due diligence, F&A, third-party inspection approvals, in case it's a short sale, have been removed and waived. Whoa, did you hear what I just said? All of section 8 just went away. When you sign this as buyer number two, it's as if you've done everything and you're just waiting for closing, which is a big deal. Okay, so it's one thing to be buyer number one who's doing the assigning. It's an entirely different thing to be buyer number two. And let me just put some flesh on this. The way we see this quite often, the most often I've seen in our company, is I get a call from an agent and they say, hey, Matt, I just need to know what I need to be aware of. My buyer, who they have a buyer's agency with, ran across this. They won't call him a wholesaler, but it turns out to be a wholesaler who has a property under contract and they want to make an offer on the property. Is there anything I should be worried about? Is there anything I should be worried about? And I just want to be like, well, were you on my contracts and negotiations call? Because yeah, there's a lot to be concerned about. And if you haven't been there, I'd strongly recommend not only do you read the assignment addendum, but you refer your client to a good real estate attorney to make sure they don't step in it. Okay. Now, the third section, now just to future page you, section 4 is much like we have in section 5 of our Rep C, who's representing you, but it's kind of interesting, right? Because there's buyer's agent number 1 and buyer's agent number 2. And that's going to be reflected in the Rep C section 5 when the assignment is completed. And we're going to get to the brokerage fees, but look at section 3, completion of the assignment. So the premise here is there's an active under contract reps, and we're going to assign it, but there's this term called completion of the assignment. If you haven't hit completion of the assignment, what is the status of the assignment? Is it real? Does it exist?
It hasn't been assigned.
It has not been assigned because it's not completed. So the buyer number one is still on the hook. So here's the caution to buyer number one. If you're going to do an assignment, until you've read through section 3 and made sure everything has taken place, you are still the buyer, and you're still obligated, and you're subject to the consequences of not performing on the contract. So this is an important section. Kurt, do me a favor. Start reading section 3 and I'll interrupt you. You're muted.
Sorry, I didn't hear you say Parker, so I sorry, my fault.
Yeah.
All right,
That's okay,
completion
go
of
ahead.
assignment. The completion of the assignment of the REPC from buyer 1 to buyer 2, completion of the assignment shall take place on the completion of the assignment shall be conducted at the escrow.
Okay, time out. Time out. Is that date going to be before or after the settlement deadline? Or in
It should
Yeah,
be
go ahead.
before the settlement deadline, but after all of your deadlines.
Well, let's think about this, right? And you're right. If buyer number 2 needs to get financing, yeah, it better be like a week or two before settlement, because you're still going to have to get your completed transfer REPC to your underwriter to get this stuff approved, to get the appraisal. So there's a timeline issue here if you're number 2. Now, listen, if you're buying cash, maybe not as big of a concern, but you need to pay attention to that date. So go ahead, completion.
The completion of the assignment shall be conducted at the escrow/closing office previously agreed to between buyer 1 and the seller. For purposes.
Stop there. Hold on, stop there. So buyer number 1 was using equity title, and your buyer is going to use Metro National Utah. It's already declared in here. You're going to complete the assignment at equity title. You don't have a choice unless you modify this.
I think you
So
meant,
sorry for interrupting, but these are
No, that's
important
okay.
things as we go through.
I think you meant Metro title, right?
What did I say?
You said equity. It's cool.
No, equity was the first one.
Oh, okay.
If
Sorry.
if your buyer is using Metro National
Okay, that
Metro
was it.
Title of Utah.
Okay.
Yep.
For purposes of this agreement, completion of the assignment shall have occurred only when all of the following have been completed. A, buyer 2 and buyer 1 have signed and delivered to each other or to the escrow closing office all documents, if any, required by this agreement, by written escrow instructions or by applicable
going.
law. B, all monies required to be paid by buyer 2 under this agreement, including the assignment fee and reimbursement to buyer 1 for all prior deposits, have been delivered.
Okay, pause. Yeah, pause there for a minute. That's a big deal. Using the example before, if earnest money was $5,000 and there's a $20,000 assignment fee, you don't get to wait till closing. You've got to pay it now at escrow to complete the assignment. Then you get to close. So this is lost on a lot of people. This is like a phase 1 closing and a phase 2. Phase 1 is, yeah, now the contract's mine. And phase 2 is when I actually, as buyer number 2, close. So go ahead.
So in that regard, let's say I pick up the wholesale property for 500,000 and I sell it for 525. I have to be paid out with the 25,000 before the seller is paid their 500,000. Am I assuming that correctly? Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Yep. Those funds have to be transferred to who? Buyer number 1.
And that includes earnest money, has to be paid.
That includes earnest
did
money.
that
And if
too.
it was new construction and you had $30,000 of upgrades, those are also known as deposits in most builders' contracts. You'd have to come up with that too.
Oh, that's very
So these are things we got to pay attention to. This falls under, this is Melissa's initial reference and Deborah's, are fiduciaries of reasonable care. We're supposed to know this stuff, you guys. We don't get the luxury of going, oh yeah, I never read it. I didn't understand it. That's never going to fly. both administratively with the DRE and if it were ever to turn to litigation. So kudos for you guys being on the call and understanding this. Okay, keep going, Parker.
Have been delivered by buyer 2 to the escrow closing office in the form of collected or cleared funds. And C, any monies required to be paid by buyer 1 under these documents have been delivered to the escrow closing office in the form of collected or cleared funds. Buyer 1 and buyer 2 shall each pay 1/2 of the fee charged by the escrow closing office for its services in completion of the assignment. So you're going halvesies on
So-
escrow fees.
So not for the closing, but for the completing the assignment. So a title company can
Ah.
charge you for completing the assignment because they're going to verify funds are there. They're going to verify the docs are in place. They're going to, right?
Mm.
So devil is in the details, guys. The devil's in the detail. Okay. So buyer number 1, buyer number 2. If you limited agency with buyer number 1 and the seller, and buyer number 1 assigns the contract, what happens to your agency with the buyer?
It goes away.
Yeah.
There you
Go on.
go. What happens with buyer number 2? What if they don't have an agent?
It doesn't matter. You're out of the picture once you've been paid out. You're no
If
longer
you
a
wanna
part
get-
to the contract.
Yeah, so play this out in your mind with me. In the ERS, section 2.1 is how much you're going to get paid for selling the house. Section 2.2 is how much you're going to get paid in addition if there's an unrepresented buyer. I'm seeing a lot of agents put 0 there. There's a lot of reasons why you shouldn't. It's pretty easy to talk through. This only applies if this situation comes about. And then section 2.3 is how much are you authorized to advertise. So if you, and I'm going to meld 2 things together here. If buyer number 2 doesn't have agency and you have 0 in section 2.2, you better either get buyer's agency for buyer number 2 or just plan on only being paid what's in section 2.1.
Okay,
That makes sense.
So I want to understand it right. So when I originally go under contract, my commission's 3% that I put in section 2.4, right?
2.1.
Sorry, 2.1.
Section 2.2 is how much in addition to that. So
Yes.
Parker, you're going to charge 4% if you're going to list somebody's house and it gets sold. That's all 4% is going to come to you.
Not 10%. Just kidding. So
I want to make sure.
So all that 4% will be paid by the
seller.
assignee. Am I saying that right? The assignee?
Yeah, I want to make sure though, before we go down that, I just want to make sure everybody understands. 2.1 is how much we as the listing brokerage and the listing agent get paid. There's
Right.
no portion of that that's going to go to a buyer. That's all listing agent, listing brokerage in 2.1. 2.2 is how much we're going to get paid in addition to what's in section 2.1 if
Okay.
there's an unrepresented buyer. And then 2.3 for the REPSI, section 4.3 is how much the seller agrees to pay a buyer's agent. So just make sure we always keep those in their own compartments because there's no bleed over between those.
Okay, so let's say I have the listing. Well, I guess that wouldn't matter in that case. So never mind.
Yeah.
So
It's okay.
let's say I represent the buyer of someone who wants a contract assigned to them. How then do
So
I
buyer number 2.
Yeah, so then do I represent, obviously I represent that guy, but do I need to get paid before the deal actually funds and records?
Not if you're representing buyer number 2, right?
Got it.
And
Okay.
play this out in your mind with me. We're seeing about 95, 96% of the time, buyer's agents and their brokerage are being paid by what is defined in the REPSI section 4.3, right? Which just to drill down on that, let's pull that up. Oops, here we go. Blank REPSI. So the section we're talking about is right here.
Yeah.
Right. So here we go. This is an old one. What's the? Yep, I've got an old one. Sorry,
Is it
it's
old
not going
rep
to show
sheet?
on.
Oh, guys, why are
It's
we
an
even on
old-
this call?
That's okay. I can fix that real quick, Parker. Hold on. So open. And oops. This should be the right one. Yeah. Okay. So section, oh my gosh, that's an blank addendum. I'm so sorry, guys. Okay, here we go.
Matt, you're totally good. These are the complications we're talking about, so it's important to get the right info.
Absolutely.
Right.
I don't know if it's helpful or not, but I did attach. I come across wholesale stuff all the time, unfortunately, but I came across so I have a couple of wholesale contracts. I included one in the chat today in case anybody wants to see it. If you're competing for listings right now is a wholesale market that's much like that. So sorry, my phone was ringing. Anyway, so it's always
Well-
good to read something like that and see what you're competing against. And also see what the
So-
consumer is seeing.
So for sake of time, and I apologize, you guys, the section 4 of the rep sheet where it talks about how much is the seller willing to pay the buyer's brokerage, right? That's the section that would be pertinent to what we're covering here. So if we go to section 5, agreement to pay brokerage fees, right? The brokerage fees due as a result of the completion of the assignment shall be X dollars, right? Or if it's something else, you can put that in, and buyer 1 shall be responsible for payment of the brokerage fees. The escrow office authorized and directed to pay the brokerage fees at the completion of the assignment, unless otherwise agreed to in writing by the broker for buyer number 1 and the broker for buyer number 2. The brokerage fees shall be shared equally between the brokers. Digest that one. Tell me what you see there. Anything noteworthy? I mean,
Did
I've
I
got some
just lose
highlights
half
there.
my commission?
If in the rep sheet, in the original rep sheet, if the seller agreed to pay 3% towards the buyer's agent, then they're just splitting the 3% between the two, buyer 1 and buyer 2 brokers.
There you go, Don. There you go. So that's an important thing. If you're not happy with that, you better addend around that. Okay.
What would be the verbiage you'd use in something like that, Matt, to addend around?
Well, I'll come back to that in 2 seconds, Parker, but remember this. Think about it from the seller's standpoint. He entered into a REPSI initially with buyer number 1 and said, yeah, I'm willing to pay 3% to a buyer's agent. And all of a sudden, but not all of a sudden, because the seller has to agree to the transfer, right? We know that from section 19. If he signs off on this addendum notice at the bottom, there is a signature line for the sellers. So there's the buyer number 1 signature, buyer number 2 signature, and the seller. So the seller's going to have to read through this. And if you're representing the seller, you should know this stuff. But if you were the seller and you originally agreed to pay 3% because there was one buyer's agent, is it really fair that you should, now that there's 2 buyer's agents in place, all of a sudden you're going to pay 6%? No, of course not. This is something you guys are doing with the contract that I signed. However you split that money, that's up to you guys. That's what section 5 is saying, right? I, the seller, agreed to pay 3%. If there's no other language, the default language is buyer number 1 agent and buyer number 2 agent, you're going to split the commission. So if that's the case, whoever said it, yeah, your buyer agent commission by doing an assignment potentially is half of what it used to be.
So this could be worked by either in the ERS or the EBBA, writing an addendum that specifies this is how much I'm getting paid. No ifs, ands, or buts.
So good point, Parker. So outside of everything we just discussed, there is a buyer broker, right? Because the national settlement and the DRA rules forever have said that you have to have your agency in writing. And in there, in section 2, it says, how much are we going to get paid? And without any other language, they're signing up saying, whatever the seller pays, I still owe the company X. Let's just say it's 3%. If all of a sudden the contract that I went forward on only pays 1.5%, then that means me as the buyer, I have to come to the table with 1.5% to make a full 3%, which is what I contractually agreed to with Remax Associates. Okay. So again, on its surface, this looks and sounds so tame. We're just going to assign the contract, right? But this is uncovering a lot of the things that are anticipated when somebody uses a blank addendum and says, we're just going to transfer the right from buyer number 1 to buyer number 2. Okay. All right. Let's see. So section 6, upon completion of the assignment as defined in section 3 above, buyer number 1 shall be deemed to have assigned to, so it's completed, right? And by the way, it is required that the seller signs this. Up until then, you only have an agreement between buyer number 1 and buyer number 2. And all of the buyer's rights and interests in the REPSI, buyer number 1, including all prior deposits, if any, and buyer number 2 shall be deemed to have accepted the assignment from buyer number 1, rights, interests in the REPSI, the assignment, and assumed all of the duties, obligations, and liabilities of the buyer, a contractual term under the REPSI, whether accrued or will accrue thereafter. And by the way, if once the assignment is completed, if there's a default, it's now buyer number 2. Up until completion, it's still buyer number 1. Okay, so you get the idea there. Now here's section 7. This is the part that I think we see pretty regularly, which is, well, the buyer number 1 and buyer number 2 agreed to this. Don't care. It's not contractual until the seller signs it. Here's what it says. Buyer 1 and buyer 2 acknowledge and agree that prior consent of the seller to this assignment has or has not been obtained. So if it has not, right? If such consent has not been obtained, that's this section, then what? Buyer number 1 makes no representations or warranties of any kind that the seller will grant or withhold such consent. So we kind of have 2 contracts going on here. We have the REPSI, and then we have the assignment addendum. And you're making a declaration here. If you check has not, you're making a declaration to buyer number 2 that, hey, this is cool. You and I are agreeing on this, but it doesn't mean a hill of beans until the seller signs off. And that's covered in language. That's also known as a CYA. Okay. In the event the seller fails to grant such consent, then buyer number 2 shall be released from all their obligations in this addendum. Buyer number 1 shall promptly refund buyer number 2 as refund to buyer number 2 as buyer number 2's sole and exclusive remedy. So buyer number 2 can't sue for performance, right? Because it's positively declared in here that no, we don't have permission of the seller yet. That's a big deal. Doesn't seem like it, but it is a big deal. And so after you return the money, that's the only thing you're going to get back as buyer number 2. And then buyer number 1 shall remain obligated to the seller to close the property, the purchase of the property as provided under the terms of the REPSI. And then this last section, non-assignability, the REPSI may not be assigned by buyer number 2. So we're only going to allow this to go 1 layer deep. You can't have like a whole series of buyer 2, 3, 4, 5. It's positively declared here. We're going 2 layers deep. Seller to buyer 1 and buyer 1 to buyer number 2. Anything beyond that is not valid, and it's specifically prohibited in the contract. So with that is, I mean, I hope that demonstrated to you that just taking a blank addendum and saying, oh my gosh, yeah, we're just going to sign it is such a bad idea. There's so much exposure, both administratively and for potential litigation. This could get really hairy really fast. So Bunny, coming full circle to what you started with, we shouldn't be scared, but we should have some apprehension. And apprehension to the degree that we make sure that we've gone back and reviewed this and understand the parameters before advising our clients. And I would just tell you this, personally, if I'm dealing with somebody and there's an assignment, I don't say this for all situations, but situations like this, if Jeff was my client, I'd be like, Jeff, listen, there's nothing illegal about this. There are a lot of moving parts, and I'm pretty good at understanding the contract, but my advice to people when anytime a deal gets a little bit outside of the norm is I'm just telling you it may be worth, $300-400 to sit down with a real estate attorney who's more well versed in these situations than I am. You don't have to, but I have found over my career that that's money well spent. Right. And if I'm going to say that, I'm probably going to reiterate it in a paper trail. In case something goes sideways, I've got that paper trail to cover me. Does that make sense, you guys?
Yes.
Okay. Really quickly, we got 5 minutes. Holy cow, time goes fast. Let me bring this back up. 2 seconds, guys.
So just a real quick question. If you were going to advise them to do that, but then you don't have a recommendation on who to advise them to, aren't you kind of just creating?
Well, okay. So that's a good question. Do you have any good real estate attorneys you know of, Bill?
No, they all retired. I'm an old fart.
His name's Matt Barton. He's just not officially licensed.
Yeah, no, please don't do that to me. So we have an attorney that we have on retainer for the company. Just let me make sure everybody understands that, because sometimes people get confused. Being on retainer simply means we have an established relationship and we're required to have a deposit with them so that if we call for the company's purposes, not your clients, not trying to be a jerk, but we don't open this up just for all client questions. For company issues, then he's there to answer our questions. Okay. Dan McDonald is who we use. He's in Alpine, Utah. He's very well credentialed. When UAR gets into jeopardy, that's one of the attorneys they call and utilize. But there are several out there, and maybe we should pull together a short list of proposed attorneys. But oh my gosh, all somebody needs to do is Google real estate attorney and do a little bit of research, and they should be able to find somebody mildly qualified to help them with a situation like this. So, right, last thing
I call the board legal hotline and get recommendations from them.
Yeah. They've got good connections with people, and that's not a bad idea. Thanks, Deborah. Okay, here's the last thing we're going to get to today, just for sake of time. Share screen. No, that's not what you want to see. That's okay. So section 20.2 or section 20, all of it. Just really quickly, we know this, right? We should make sure our seller understands this and our buyers, right? As a buyer, yes, you're going to want to get insurance on the property, but for the seller, right? This is certainly important, right? If prior to closing any part of the property is damaged, destroyed, I'm in section 20.2, by fire, vandalism, flood, earthquake, act of God, whatever that is, risk of loss or such damage shall be borne by the seller. That's why it's important that they keep their homeowner's insurance up until they close on the property. Provided, however, here's the interesting one. And yes, I've actually had this 3 times in my career. Not me personally, but agents. Provided, however, that if the cost of repairing such loss or damage would exceed 10% of the purchase price referenced in section 2, either the seller or the buyer may elect to cancel the REPC by providing written notice to the other party, in which instance the earnest money deposit or deposits, if applicable, shall be returned to the buyer. So let me give you a simple example on this. One of my agents years ago had a property, and it had a nicely finished out basement, and they had somebody who was supposed to redo the window wells, right, on the entire property. And they had one of these freak Utah summer storms. And for whatever reason, it still boggles my mind. On a couple of the windows, they had removed the window wells and they had tapered the dirt down towards the window. Now, I'm not a physics guy, but water tends to run downhill. And so
That's epic.
This freak storm with all this water just shot down these downward ramps to the windows, flooded the basement. And even though the seller was willing to repair it and get it up to snuff, the buyers, we had the sellers on this one, the buyers were like, yeah, we don't want to deal with potential mold issues down the road, et cetera, et cetera. And they literally came up with the calculation, and it exceeded 10% of the purchase price, and they backed out of the deal, even though they were past their due diligence. I mean, it was literally like 3 days away from closing. And the sellers were really upset at the guy who did the window wells, but the buyers were completely justified. But just know that that is the criteria, is the damage or the cost to repair the damage. It could be a fire, it could be a flood, it could be any number of things. Has to exceed 10% of the purchase price of the home. And if it does, then you have the ability to back out of the contract. So, all right. Any final questions, comments? Josh, you have been terribly quiet this whole meeting. I find that odd.
No
Does that help you guys?
That was great.
I'm
That was helpful.
Josh.
Yeah, go ahead, Josh.
I was just gonna say I love being quiet and listening to you talk. It's been that way for over a decade, Matt.
Okay, so listen, final comment. This is almost like an assignment. I need to show you one more thing. We live in the day and age where AI is becoming more prevalent, and hopefully you guys find some advantage in that. But I'm just going to give you a final bit of caution on this. Okay. I was doing some work on this last night and this morning, and I came up with, let's see if I can make this here. Yeah, there we go. Sure. So I had asked about assignment, right? I was just kind of curious because I've found ChatGPT wrong on any number of things. It's still a great resource, don't get me wrong. But I asked about assignment in Utah, and it said, oh yeah, the Utah REPC is assignable. And I said, are you sure? Have you looked at section 19? And this is what it came back. Incorrect for Utah's REPC. It's, you know, it's very polite, says something to the effect, oh, hey, thanks for checking. That's some really good feedback. And then it goes along and says, oh yeah, here's my corrected answer. Assignments are prohibited under Utah's standard REPC. It can occur only after the seller provides written consent. And so that's my little bit of caution to you in the day and age of artificial intelligence. It's super great, but still do your own thinking and your own verification. It'll put you very often spot on with stuff. But if your spidey sense or whatever you want to call it says, I'm not sure that's right, do your own fact checking, because that seems pretty straightforward, right? If artificial intelligence can read the REPC, how did it miss section 19, which is explicitly clear? So just your tech tip of the day, beware of artificial intelligence. Okay. All right, all. Thank you for being on the call, and we will talk soon.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Bye.
Don't forget, if you want a copy of the addendum, send me an email.
Thanks, Matt.
See ya.
Thank you